My guest today is Peter Mansbridge. He is one of Canada's most trusted and recognizable journalists. He spent more than 3 decades as chief correspondent and anchor of CBC's The National. He guided Canadians through some of the most defining moments in our history: national tragedies, elections, global crises, wars. He's interviewed prime ministers, presidents, and world leaders, and he's helped us all understand our country and the world better. He now hosts a great podcast called The Bridge with Peter Mansbridge. He continues to explore leadership, trust, and the changing media landscape. Here's my conversation with him. Let's get started. Well, Peter Mansbridge, what an honor to have you as my first guest on the Christy Clark Show. First guest.
Well, I'm honored to be the first guest. I'm honored to have our role reversal here. It's usually the other way around, me interviewing you. But this is great. Looking forward to it.
Well, I'm not gonna try and give you payback for all the questions that you probably threw at me that I remember thinking, oh, Peter, that was so mean.
Oh, I was never mean.
Well, I don't think you meant to be mean.
No.
But here we are, Peter. I was in radio for a long time, as you know. You were in TV for a much longer time, and obviously before that in radio. Now you and I are both doing podcasts. I love your podcast, The Bridge, by the way. It is fantastic. I really recommend that to anybody who's listening today if you haven't got onto it. But I mean, we're both doing pods. What does that tell us about traditional media and where it's going?
Well, it tells us a lot. It tells us that things have changed dramatically. Technology was bound to change a lot of things, and podcasts is a great opportunity to, talk about the things you want to talk about. Have an audience that reacts to you. What you're going to find out, and what I found out and was surprised to find out, is a lot of people listen to podcasts, and they're a different kind of people than listen to traditional media. Because the reaction I get, and I get hundreds of letters every week based on my podcast, and they're smart. You may not agree with them, but they're smart. They understand issues. They want to put their point of view across, and they make their case. But they listen. They listen carefully, and they love the exchange of opinion they hear on podcasts, and it's kind of unfiltered, and there's no kind of time restriction on a lot of this stuff. You remember from your earlier broadcast days that, wonderful opportunity to talk at some length. I spent 50 years in radio, first for a couple of years, and then television, where the object was to get everything you could into kind of a minute and a half or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can't, it was, Cronkite was right years ago. You're far too young to remember even who that is. But of course, I do remember him. And he used to say, television news, the mainstream media, is just the headlines. You've got to want to know more. You've got to read. You got to listen. But if you're going to just assume that television news will tell you everything you need to know, you're wrong. That's not going to happen. And I always used to maintain that when I was in television news, as much as we got kind of the glamour and the glory. Those days are gone, but as much as we got that at the time, I always recognized that we weren't giving all the information that people needed to know to make up their minds about the issues.
But I think it's confusing for people now because there's so many different diverse sources you can go to, and you can get vastly opposing opinions. And there's a strong, I think there's an inherent part of us that wants to just listen to the thing that we already believe rather than be challenged in it. And that is, I think, that's when I say, like, are we at a post-truth society? Because that's a threat to democracy. If people just believe what they want to believe or what they're inclined to believe, it just may be just entrenching a whole bunch of opinions about things that are wrong, maybe in some cases dangerous.
Oh, listen, you're absolutely right. This post-truth era issue, I think we've got to be careful on it because there are so many different pillars to what broadcasting and information offers right now. Listen, I was in the mainstream media for half a century. all of the CBC. But I was dealing with news. That's what it was. And, I was adamant about it with the people I worked with, and they were with me, that we're not telling people what we think the truth is. We're telling people what we have discovered to be the truth. This is it. This is what we know about whatever the issue may be. Now, it's one thing that's a newscast. What I do now is not a newscast. It's a podcast, like what you're doing. And it expresses opinion. And people have to understand that. And I keep reminding my listeners that this is not a newscast. This isn't the National. This isn't what I used to do. This is, you're getting a hint of my opinions on things. You're certainly getting the opinions and the feelings of the people I put on the program. And the whole idea of the people I put on the program is the opportunity to expand listeners' knowledge.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with it, but you want the opportunity to think about the issues. And here's somebody who's expressing their views on it. You may be influenced by that. You may not. But that's what it is. It's not a newscast. Newscasts are, you still have to demand, as I do of the newscasts that I follow, you have to demand accuracy, trustworthiness, the truth. And that's kind of where we are. We're in a delicate situation because people don't trust the news media anymore. They don't trust it the way they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. When we've seen the numbers drop, politicians' numbers on trust have dropped. News has dropped considerably. And your point about democracy is critical. I mean, for, a supposed pillar of democracy is journalism, is the free press. It's the opportunity to understand what's going on through the eyes and ears and, fingers typing from the press. And if you lose that trustworthiness in journalism, you've lost a pillar of democracy, and you know where we're going on that. It's not a good place.
Yeah, what do they say? That if you want to destroy a democracy, you go after the educational, the institutions of higher learning, you go after the judiciary, and you go after the media. You destabilize all three, which is what we've seen happen, I think, in the United States to some extent. It's been debilitating for the world when a country that powerful and that useful, and that productive is finding itself where they are now. I worry about Canada. Like in my introduction, I talked about how when you were in the news media, by the way, my mother found you very distracting. She said you were too good looking, and she just couldn't, Knowlton Nash, she said he was just so, I don't know, boring.
He wasn't boring. Let me tell you. But it's when I knew that it was time to quit. It was when I started. I used to, when I go public speaking or on a tour or whatever, young people would come up to me, both men and women, and say, "Oh, we love your program. We love watching you." And the girls would say, "Can I get a picture?" and blah, blah, blah. And then it changed to, "My mother loves you."
Oh,
right? Like you're saying. But then when I finally decided that it was time to go, it was when they started saying, "My grandmother loves you."
No.
So then I thought, okay, it's time. It's time for somebody else. And that's when I moved on. And who knew? A couple of months later, I was doing a podcast. My son pushed me into it. Young guy in his 20s. He said, "You got to do this. This is your opportunity to do something different, but stay kind of within the same orbit as you've always been in." And I did. But let me make one point about what you're saying on the media in general, because I think it's important for people to understand this. The media is not a monolith. We don't all operate the same way. And this is where it's part of the responsibility of the public. They've got to determine who they trust. There are a lot of different places you can go to get information, lots of them. Some you can trust, some you can't. But you got to make that decision because they're different. The CBC operates differently than CTV does. They're both good news organizations, but they operate differently. And they operate differently than the Globe and Mail and the National Post. They all have different issues that confront them in putting together their newscasts of the day. And you have to decide which one you're comfortable with. And you have to be prepared to leave that one you're comfortable with for years or even all your life if you suddenly feel disappointed by them. But keep in mind, they're not all the same. And so when I hear these criticism, the media is dead, we can't trust them anymore, that's overstating the fact. Because they're not a monolith. They are simply not all the same. I can't argue about what happens in other departments of the CBC, but I can argue about what I saw there during the time I was there and the influences that were had. And, we were always getting complaints about bias. When the Conservatives were in power, the Liberals would complain that we were tilting to the Conservatives and then vice versa. I can remember one time where you'll love this story. It was 1974. It was the general election in 74. Stanfield was the Conservative leader. Pierre Trudeau was the Liberal leader. And about halfway through the campaign, the Conservatives were really upset. You're not covering us the same way you're covering the Liberals. Now, this wasn't me. I was a junior player at the time. But, the argument was you're not covering us the way you're covering them. They're getting a lot more airtime, and they had all the minutes, the breakdown of everything as to who got more minutes than the other. And the executives of the CBC at that time looked at these numbers and said, oh, my God, they're right. We can't argue this. We've got to fix this, and we're going to fix it tonight. So they ordered up a 5-minute item on Robert Stanfield for that night. Well, it turned out that night, Robert Stanfield was in Quebec City. He had a rally in Quebec City, and there were probably like 25 people in the room. And his French was not the greatest French in the world.
Dear.
And but they ran a 5-minute item. Now you could argue that from the other side. Okay, they dealt with the bias issue, or you could say, man, they're really biased. Look what they just did. So, these things are sometimes harder to deal with than one thinks. But all I can say is in the time I was there, were we perfect? We were not perfect, but we weren't biased.
Well,
we were just trying to tell the story the best we can.
My mother got very used to seeing you, Peter, and she, I think, did in the end agree that you were perfect. So there you go. Now, I want to move on to some of the things that you've done and witnessed in the world, because your perch at the head of this, as the voice of Canada at CBC was unique. You have been like Princess Diana, the Pope, installations of the Pope, 9/11. And, you've kind of shuttled us through all of these topics.
Sure.
I'm thinking back to 9/11. I mean, that was a day when my son was like 2 weeks old. I just had my only child, and he was 2 weeks old. And I woke up that morning and I went to my old school answering machine, and I had like 30 messages from my brother saying, get up, get up, get up. You can't believe what's happening. And I turned on the TV and we saw you, and we saw the Twin Towers burning. And what I remember about it is nobody knew what was going to happen next. They grounded every flight. My husband stayed home because he was on a flight to Ottawa that day, but we just stayed in Vancouver. We didn't know if there were more bombs that were going to go off all over the place. Do you remember that? Like that sense of total dislocation that we all had. And it was almost like I would have imagined my parents would have thought about, nuclear war back in, the Cuban Missile Crisis or something like that.
Sure.
I mean, it was unique, I think, in my experience. Was it unique in yours as someone who's seen more of these things than anyone?
Absolutely. It was, there were two things that you were left with. One, you didn't know what was going to happen next. And two, you were unsure of what had just happened. You did know that the world was never going to be the same as it had been, that lots of things were going to change as a result of what we'd witnessed. I mean, I was on the air for 44 hours straight there. I took a break in the middle of the night to shower and change.
You didn't sleep?
Didn't sleep. Who could sleep? It caught everybody by not only surprise, but they were totally worried about what could happen next.
Mm-hmm.
And you like worrying about, your young child. I came out of the studio to take that shower. I came into the dressing room. It was like 4:00 in the morning, and the light was blinking on my phone, which is a private line. So I knew it was, it was family, it was somebody like that. And I answered the phone. It was my daughter in Winnipeg, who was at university at the time, and the message said, "Dad, I'm watching. I just want to know I love you. Don't want you to know that." And that was basically the extent of the call. And I put it down. Obviously it was emotional, but at the same time, I thought, my God, this is happening out there to families around the world. That's what they're doing. They're connecting with each other. Mm-hmm. To say things like that, which gave it me at 4 a.m. I mean, I was supercharged, running on the energy of the story as it was happening, because it was changing literally every minute. But it made me suddenly stop and realize, oh my God, the impact of this is much greater than even I thought of. You know what it's like? You sit in a television studio or radio studio, it's almost like watching television yourself. And sometimes it doesn't feel real. It's just like all there. But that's what it was like that day. I mean, I was never one, because I spent 20 years as a reporter before I started anchoring, and I was never one who wanted to be in a studio for the big story. I wanted to be out there, whether it was being in Berlin when the wall came down, which I was, or being in Ottawa when the constitutional conferences were taking place. You wanted to kind of be there and have access to the players. Suddenly on that one, on 9/11, I was in the studio, and I was dependent totally on the people around me. The people, you know what it's like, whispering in your ear, saying this and that and the other, and you have to trust them.
Yeah.
You have to know who you can trust on a day like that and who you can't. And when they're bringing you information constantly, you can get tripped up on a day like that. We had a couple of times where we got tripped up on bad information, and you have to explain that. You have to explain that to your viewers.
Well, and that everybody has their TV on. Like, everybody is watching you. It's not, oh, well, it was the 11 o'clock news, and, it was just a little, it was only a story about a dog that got hit by a car. It's a lot different from that. And all that information is real time, real worry, real, for a lot of people, huge anxiety. So not your average dog gets hit by a car story. Right. A lot more responsibility there. But, I'm curious about your view about the impact that had on people kind of around the world, the seismic change that it caused. Let's contextualize where Trump is now. Like, what, all of the stuff that's happening in the States, out of the States, the tariffs, the immigration issues, the relationships around the world all changing. And, it's just been chaos. Mm-hmm. Different kind of chaos, even more unpredictable. Is this going to be, are we in a period now of the kind of change, more change, permanent change, as a result of the Trump administration than we saw from 9/11?
Oh, I think so. Listen, 9/11 resulted in, in wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan first, and then Iraq. And you can look at history now, 25 years later, saying, did they do the right thing by going into Afghanistan? I mean, look where Afghanistan is now. It's exactly where it was.
There's no way it's the right thing. All those Canadian lives that were lost, the British lives that were lost, American lives that were lost. Yeah. It was for an imprudent adventure to try and sort out a country and change its traditions that are thousands and thousands and thousands of years embedded. It was crazy.
However, what we're witnessing now is a real change in the way the world rotates. The relationship between countries and continents has changed. There's a feeling that, oh, well, if Trump loses the next election, the Democrats win, they'll all go back to the way it was. That's not going to happen. Things are different now. The change between Canada and the U.S. is a generational one. Many Canadians, and for the most part, for good reason, are upset about their friends in the States and the way this has unfolded over the last year. And that's suddenly not going to disappear. The other thing is this kind of relationship, people generally have towards governments. The first time I saw this was in 1963 after Kennedy was assassinated. It began a period of which the people challenged what they were being told by government. Conspiracies really started to take hold on certain things, and that's never changed. It's only gotten worse. Now we're seeing the same kind of thing times 100. Because of the way governments operate, and in particular, the way the U.S. government has operated.
You mean the government is actually harnessing the conspiracy theories, repeating them, rather than giving people the actual undisputed truth about things?
Well, it would be hard to argue that Donald Trump is giving the undisputed truth about anything. He lies. It's second nature. He just lies. And he's done that since day one of his first term, when he told lies about the size of the audience that had been there for his inauguration. And he hasn't slowed down since, to the point where people just kind of accept it. They rarely challenge it anymore. You watch news conferences in the White House, and he just spews that kind of fire hose of lies, and people just move on to the next question. Now, how does that reflect around the world? Does that happen in a similar way? Does it happen in a similar way in our country? There's certainly been, politicians who stretch the truth in Canada, but one assumes that it's not at the level at which it is there. But it's all part of this issue that goes back to your first subject, which is trust in the media. They don't trust the media. They also don't trust the politicians who talk to the media. Mm-hmm. It's not a good place to be.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think we're in a post-truth world. I do think, though, with a son who's 24 and all of his, his pals around, there's a literacy about lies and the internet that's unique to that generation because they're native to it. And it gives me some hope that there is an upcoming group of people who are going to be running the world one day, who can differentiate, who understand and can contextualize all this BS that you see on the internet, and they don't take it all so seriously. They're not as all influenced by it. So perhaps that's good. But the thing that isn't great, we look back on, is what that generation went through. And I'm very interested in your views as you reflect on this, Peter, in that woke period, where, people got fired for some of the, for comments that were perfectly normal to make. People were vilified. Some people never made it back out of that period. I mean, you were in media. I mean, that's tough and not truthful, right? It doesn't encourage the truth.
No, it absolutely doesn't. I mean, I've been gone 7 years. It was starting when I left, but it was it was kind of a controlled advance into wokeism. But after I left, and I'm not associating anything that I did or didn't do with what happened, but it got worse. It got worse, and it came down from the top. The management of the CBC was influenced by the wishes and desires of a government on that issue, and it filtered down, and it created all kinds of problems. divided newsrooms on some of the big issues of the day. And I mean, really divided. I mean, it's good to have division and arguments, as I said earlier, but when it's out of hand, it's not good. And you're right. People lost their jobs as a result of it. Never got back. Really good people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was partly generational, I think, too. And also, I mean, generational and regional, depending on where you grew up, what kind of a place you lived in. If you didn't live in a big cosmopolitan city, you didn't have a university degree, and you were just a regular person, it was really easy to make those mistakes.
I don't know how it made you feel, but I know how it made me feel. When we'd go around the world, Canadian governments, leading Canadian figures, and lecture others about the kind of human rights issues that they should deal with in their countries. That always gave me pause, and I'd say that at least pause. I'd get upset because, I mean, I lived in northern Manitoba. I saw what happened, with First Nations people and others, whether they were Inuit or Métis or what have you. And what worries me that in still so many parts of the country, those issues still exist. And they're the kind of issues we lecture others on. And so I have a problem with that. Now, I know some parts of the country are much better at dealing with this than others. And there's been some improvement. I think of Murray Sinclair and Gord Downey and others who I know you've met over time, who committed their lives to trying to make a difference on that front. And I think they did. And they gave a whole generation of Canadians a reason to think about the steps forward. I just hope what we've gone through on wokeism is not going to harm that, because there is still, I'm not sure we're a racist country, but we do have issues.
Yes,
that we still haven't dealt with,
yeah,
and we can't ignore that.
Though I think that First Nations are starting. We are starting to really see some change in that direction. At least we certainly see it in BC, where, all the major projects that we have got underway have made Indigenous people equity owners, and, Indigenous people are doing fish farming and forestry and mining, and I mean, it's sharing the wealth, right? So I think we're getting somewhere on that. But I just, anyway, enough said. I look back at it and I just feel that whole period was kind of lost years for Canada and for the world, where we could have been discussing things that were, in a mature way and made more of a material difference.
Yeah, I don't think we disagree on that point at all. It just, it's still, you travel the world, as both of us have done, and, I've done a lot of it, and you go into some really difficult places in the world, and and this is going to sound corny, but it's not corny, it's real. When they find out you're Canadian, they look at you like you've won the pot of gold. It couldn't be any better. And, we can accept that and recognize how much they wish they were us and they lived where we live. That doesn't mean we can't ignore the fact that there is still work to be done here.
Yeah.
But man, you're still looked at as a Canadian, as somebody who's the luckiest people in the world.
The numbers, I agree with you. The numbers, though, recently do not support that view entirely that foreigners have of us, that generous view. I mean, you saw that study that came out where they suggested that Canada is poorer than Alabama based on the numbers that we actually see, the economic numbers that we actually see. And now, I mean, my political view of that is we didn't have a government that encouraged economic growth for 10 years in Canada, and that was profoundly undermining. But we do now have government that is interested, it seems, in making economic growth happen. They're struggling to get the provinces to work with them in some cases. What do you put the odds on success for Mark Carney's government in really sparking up economic growth?
Listen, it's an enormous challenge that's in front of him, right? And he's taking enormous risk in doing what he's trying to do. I mean, he's basically put all his chips into the middle of the table. He's betting the house here on his plan is the plan that's going to result in a new Canada and a more prosperous Canada, and where people are going to have better jobs and better housing and, a better cost of living, all of that. But it's a gamble. It's a risk.
Mm-hmm.
So far, he seems to be doing everything right. I mean, he's got everybody on side. Your old pals, the first ministers. I mean, it looks like love in most.
Well, they weren't all my pals.
No, they weren't all your pals. That's correct. But you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. But it on that front, it looks good. And the Europeans look at him as if he's like the savior. Now, it's early going, and Canadians, while they seemingly are very much on his side with his positioning right now, that can all change. At some point, they got to see the deliverables on all this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's convinced they will. Meantime, he's spending a lot of money on trying to get there, but feels that's needed. So we'll see. So, listen, I think like a lot of Canadians watching this with a considerable amount of interest, and obviously most Canadians hope that this is going to work out, no matter whether you're cheering for Mark Carney or Doug Ford or Danielle Smith or whoever it may be, and what they're putting forward. The people are on their side at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but you know what it's like.
Oh, yeah.
That can change.
Yeah, that's right. And it's good. I think the problem that Carney is going to inevitably encounter is that the time it takes to actually start generating economic growth from projects, because things, don't happen fast, nothing does, despite government's best efforts to reduce regulation. It's just hard to do. Like that could be longer than he has time left in this mandate. That's the problem he's going to have. And so, because it's, people are so hopeful. His poll numbers show that people are happy with where this is going. Yay, yay. Well, a couple years, no dirt being turned over yet in the ground, no jobs being created yet because it's still all in the planning process. Well, guess what? Then suddenly the opposition has a really good argument for getting rid of you because you didn't say you did what you were going to do.
Let me ask you this. You look at Carney now. Is he more of a conservative than he is a liberal?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, as someone who's been in the Liberal Party, I will tell you, liberals don't care what your ideological view is. Liberals just want everybody in the same tent so that they can get more people elected. Like, liberals are really the only party that only cares about winning. And the other two parties care more about your ideological take on things, which I think is why liberals have tended to dominate, have been around more in Canada, federally. But, I would say, I don't think Carney is a liberal or a conservative in a big P party sense. I think that he is a Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, Brian Mulroney kind of leader. A guy who's like, okay, we need to get investment for the country, build some businesses, get people working, and then everything will start to look after itself, which is a pretty good recipe. So is that a liberal view? Yes, it is. Is that a conservative view? Yes, it is. He decided to be leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, so I presume that means he's a liberal.
Well, the other one wasn't open at the time.
Exactly.
I'm sure there were times in the last 10 years that he wondered whether he should run for the other guys.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, because I think a political party is like a car. And Mark Carney gets into the Liberal Party car. He doesn't know how to fix the car. He doesn't know who's driving the car. He knows, but he's told the driver where the car is going. He just gets in the back seat, gets to his destination, and says thank you very much to the people that drove him there. That's how political parties work. And I think he's been the most the least partisan prime minister we've had in a long time. And I think Canadians are kind of ready for an end to all this hardcore partisanship. I don't know what your view is about that.
I think that's where he is now. It'll be interesting to see if once he's been in there another year, or whether, if he decides in the next couple of months, I need a stronger mandate. I need an election. Then he's going to look less nonpartisan than he looks now. But that's a gamble too. Everything's a risk right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hardly ever see him say the words Liberal Party.
No.
I mean, compare that to how often Pierre Poilievre or Don Davies, or whoever's the NDP now, says the name of their political party. They say it all the time. It's their brand. Carney never. Well, I'm sure he does, but I hardly ever see him say it.
Yeah. No, I don't think he does. I can't recall the last time he did in any, meaningful way. It slips out every once in a while, I'm sure, but.
Yeah. But you know what? That's the thing about politics, Peter. If you want to be in politics, you have to find your moment. And when it's there, you have to take it.
He sure found the moment. He sure found the moment. He lucked in. Now, he lucked into what is a really challenging moment.
But exciting.
It's exciting. But the difference with him and almost anybody else I've covered is maybe Pierre Trudeau was a little like this, but Carney really believes he can do it, that he has a plan. And then he knows how to do it and who to have with him to do it. That's like why he brings people like Tim Hodgson in. He really believes they're not in it to be, some political icon of the future. They actually think they can make the country work better than it is right now. We'll see whether they keep that feeling in play, because it is a challenging, risky time.
It is. And, it is very hard to inherit a government that is really a creature of your predecessor. Like, I did that. I inherited a government from Gordon Campbell, but it was ideologically the same as, I was pursuing different policies, but they were on the same ideological basis. And the civil service was small that Gordon had left. It was very full of very good people, lots of people to promote. Carney, first of all, his office is still filled with all of the people who, there's a few exceptions, who worked for Justin Trudeau. That's not going to make life easier for him. And the civil service is bloated. And it's got the same problem. People who for a decade were following a completely different agenda. So it's kind of like, he's got a whole bunch of tools to use, and none of them really fit in his hands. None of them are right for the job that he wants to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point how many of them he's listening to. I think what he's wanted to do ever since he got there, and I'm just talking off the top of my head, I don't know anything here, but I've always had the sense that he just wants to get rid of a lot of those people because he doesn't listen to them. He makes up his mind very quickly about people, whether he thinks they're worthy of him listening to.
Yeah.
And if they're not, he moves on. And he can figure that out, it seems, in an instant. But
and in that way, he does share that too with Pierre Trudeau.
That's
I think.
True. Yeah.
Right? Quick judgments, very smart, completely different ideological perspective.
Yeah.
So before you have to leave me, Peter, I've got two questions. First one is, what are the biggest threats now for us? We've got separatism in Quebec, obviously, as always, and now in Alberta. we've got climate change, which nobody seems to be as interested in, but it's certainly, it's still there. We've got income inequality and affordability issues. We have rising authoritarianism all around the world. I mean, if you were going to choose your top 3 things for people to worry about in Canada, what would they be?
Well, some of the external threats are real, obviously, are from south of the border. But I see the number one threat to us in this moment is internal division. We can't afford to let that happen. And that means that there's got to be give and take everywhere. I always remember, I'm an immigrant. I came, from, I was born in Britain, raised in Southeast Asia, and then we came to Canada in the mid-50s. And my dad used to sit my sister and myself down. It was before my brother came along, and he put out a big map of the country. And he'd say, we lived in Britain. You could have put it in this tiny little spot here in Canada, or we lived in Malaya, and it's like Prince Edward Island. It's so tiny. We now live in Canada. Look at this country. It's so big. There are so many different reasons that we're different. We're a diverse country, whether it's in geography, whether it's in language, whether it's in culture, whether it's in mineral resources. All these things are reasons why we can be arguing for all time about the future of the country. But we all remember back in those days, it used to be, Canada always finds a way to get together. There's always a way. We haven't talked about that recently for the last 10, 20 years. There's always been divisions, and there's all kinds of them right now. But if we let them dominate the discussion and the future of the country, then everything else is going to fall apart. We need some unity. And that's going to be hard because it's not natural. The very fact my dad showed the map, we're different. We have all kinds of different issues. But at this moment, if we believe the future is a united Canada, then we got to find a way to make it united on a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last thing. If you are approached by young people who want to go into journalism, do you tell them it's a good idea, or do you try and get them to maybe think about medicine or teaching instead?
No, I absolutely tell them if they're interested, they've got to get into it because it needs a degree of salvation here right now. And it needs good people who believe that journalism is important. I've seen too many people, and I support in a significant way through my charitable foundation, UBC's journalism program, Carleton University in Ottawa, and King's College in Halifax. We're kind of a national program that I'm trying to support. But what I've seen through those schools and others is too many graduates coming out who are more interested in advocacy than in journalism.
Yeah.
That's not the future. That's not the future that's going to make Canadians more informed about what's going on around them. So I say absolutely get into it and be prepared to go anywhere. I mean, I started in Churchill, Manitoba. You can't get smaller than that.
You started as an announcer in the airport, Peter. How old were you then? 18?
19.
19.
I didn't graduate from high school. I never went to university. And I don't say that for bragging rights. I wish I had, but I didn't. So I started at the basement of broadcasting. I mean, I was hired literally because somebody heard my voice in the airport lounge. On the PA system. And a guy came running over to me. And you got to remember, this is Churchill, Manitoba, population 1,000 people. The guy says, listen, I'm the manager of the little CBC Northern Service Station. I can't get anybody to do the late night shift. Would you be interested? You got a great voice. I said, absolutely, I'll do that and work at the airport during the day, which is what I did, which tells you something about what the CBC Human Resources Department was like in those days. They didn't ask anything about any other part of my background. They just said, you got a voice, get on here. And that's how I started. But because I was at the ground floor of all this and basically self-taught as a journalist, it wasn't that hard. My parents, we'd grown up sitting at the dining room table every night over supper. We were lucky that both our parents were home at supper, and we'd talk about the issues of the day, and we'd debate them. And my father would encourage us to take different sides, and then reverse different sides. And it made us be aware of what was going on around us. And to me, journalism has always been about three things. Are you interested in what goes on around you? Are you willing to ask questions about what's going on around you? And are you able to communicate what you find out to people who are equally interested? Mm-hmm. That's journalism. You layer on all the expertise and the training and all that, and writing skills, because there's nothing more important than writing. But you need those three core things. If you don't have them, you're wasting your time going into journalism.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. It's a good way to end it, Peter Mansbridge. I'm so delighted you took the time with me today. It was very kind of you. My first edition of the show, and it's an auspicious beginning for me, from my perspective. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and please say hello to your mother for me.
Well, God bless her. She's passed away. But,
well, she'll hear this anyway.
You know what? I hope so. And meantime, we'll all be listening to you on your show, The Bridge, which is a real contribution to Canadian journalism these days, Peter. So thank you.
Thanks, Christy. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.